This is news from America's Heartland. You're watching Heartlander News. Welcome into Heartlander News. Hope you're doing well today. I'm Chris Stigall. Speaking of Democrats getting pantsed, dressed down, and embarrassed, street tough Scott Bessent, I call him, our Treasury Secretary, went to Capitol Hill yesterday. This guy also wildly entertaining, never backing down from a fight. Democrats thought they had him. Bessent having none of it. Let's go to the audio. And by the way, including some Republicans too, Thom Tillis, who's on his way out the door. I love this. He thought he really had Bessent in the crosshairs. You know, Tillis is no friend of the Trump administration. Again, he's on his way out. He's been embarrassingly defeated. He's hostile to Trump. He's hostile to the administration. And so he wants to point out that street tough Scott Bessent does, in fact, have a temper. And he has said things in reports that he's threatened people, or he's threatened to hit people, or he's gone chest to chest with Elon and things like that. So Tillis thinks, I'm going to get him. I'm going to call him out on this thing. Did you really say this? Bessent's answer, classic.
Tell Palti you were going to punch him in the face?
No, sir. I actually said I was going to kick his ass.
Good. Okay, good. I share the emotion. Thank you.
And as I said, that was last summer 25, and many teams have fights in the locker room and then go out and win for the team on the field.
Yeah. No, I was just curious because everybody's going to be showing that. I made it clear I'm not going to support Palti.
What the hell is Tillis wearing there, Aaron? Is that a bolo from North Carolina? Do they wear bolos in North Carolina? I don't know the style down there.
I don't think so. I think it's a bolo, but yeah, I don't know if that's a style there.
When did Tillis start wearing bolos? Anyway, don't you love that? Did you say you were going to punch Bill Pulte in the face? No, sir. I did not say that. I said I was going to kick his ass. See, this is what I like about Bessent. There's nothing. He's not hiding anything. He's arguably one of the most transparent and honest guys going. He doesn't hide the fact that he's a hothead, and he lets people know it. Anyway, this rolled on. It was awfully fun. Ron Wyden, Democrat senator, trying again to pin Scott Bessent, Bessent having none of it, and reminding us exactly of the Wyden family and their travails.
And I had hoped to keep this in terms of the economy. Senator Wyden has mendaciously slandered the Treasury building in an attempt to cover up his son having an investment meeting with Jeffrey Epstein to ask for funding. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Let's be clear here. Nobody is interested in the ramblings of a capo in the most corrupt regime in American history. We want to get some facts about this deal. That's what we're here for. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I will ask my questions first today.
And we would like to hear what Adam Wyden and Jeffrey Epstein talked about. Your son's largest investment position was Rick's Cabaret. So did your son and Jeffrey Epstein talk about pole dancing as he begged him for money using your limited credibility?
Oh my goodness. Isn't that wonderful? I could watch it all day. Let's do one more. Pocahontas tried her swing at it, and old Scott reminded her of the dirt on her hands too.
My career in the financial sector, and 45% of our small and community banks disappeared since the great financial crisis. Senator Warren likes to say, ooh, we might have a bank failure. She killed 45% of the small banks.
I think the Trump administration is rightly focused on creating the conditions for private sector growth.
My career in the financial
That's exactly right. Elizabeth Warren probably did more to damage small lending institutions than anyone else. Again, ESG, we talked about this week. Remember, environmental social justice. Small banks were forced to stop doing business with anyone that did not meet the DEI standards implemented by the federal government. They were told that if you lend to people who do business with others who don't implement all of this social experimentation, we'll shut you down. And that's exactly what happened time and again. The consolidation of small banks and lending institutions all over the country, swallowed up by the big ones. That's a huge problem. And Elizabeth Warren and Democrats are the ones that presided over all of that. While we're talking about politicians on Capitol Hill, just quickly, just because I didn't know where else to throw this in if I didn't, Senator Eric Schmidt and one of the stupidest people in all of Congress, Mazie Hirono of Hawaii. I mean, really uniquely dumb, this woman. She and Senator Schmidt squared off yesterday in a hearing in number 27 here. Aaron, take a listen to this.
You mentioned a few words, horrific. I think to the American taxpayer that's been ripped off by people who came to this country, to rip them off, that's horrific. You talk about bizarre. No, it's my time now. It's my time. You went over time. It's my time. Bizarre is the idea that you would be here in this committee defending violent murderers from being deported, that you would be defending violent rapists from being deported, that you would defend people who took advantage of the good people of this country of their taxpayer dollars. That is bizarre. A terrorist who kills American citizens, you know what's bizarre is your defense of that. So forgive me if you're 24 million Americans should be, or naturalized citizens should be afraid. That's ridiculous. You have no. You have nothing but fear mongering here. What I'm saying in this bill is, if you do those things, to the American people, if you take advantage of taxpayers, you're not recognized. If you commit a terrorist act, if you commit wholesale welfare fraud, within 10 years, you're damn right we're deporting you. If you're convicted, it's not being accused of anything. If you are convicted in a court of law of these crimes, absolutely we should not only convict you, but we should deport you. Gone. And if you think that's some sort of like negative assertion towards me, I'll take it. I love it. That's what we should be doing more of in this country, because people are coming here and they're ripping off taxpayers. And I, for one, don't want to see it anymore. And if you want to have that debate in public, we can do it. But that's what this hearing is about, to examine the Scam Act. So I'd just like to expose a few of your lies in your most recent dissertation on the dais here.
Senator Eric Schmidt, I was just looking on social media today, and he said the Senate just passed my provision to put an end to one of the most indefensible public safety failures in America. Criminal illegal aliens sitting in jail, then released into American neighborhoods by Democrat politicians because of sanctuary policies. In 2025 alone, sanctuary cities and states released nearly 18,000 aliens from custody instead of transferring them to ICE. That's a betrayal of every American family forced to live with the consequences. My provision supercharges ICE with the resources it needs to meet these criminals at the jailhouse door and then arrest them the second they're released. If sanctuary cities will not protect their people, ICE will have the resources to do their job. This is a major victory for public safety, border security, and the rule of law. And of course, the dumbest woman in the United States Congress, and that's a tall order when I say that, Mazie Hirono, finds this problematic somehow. Also, the Trump administration yesterday at Fox Business told banks that immigration status may be considered in mortgages and credit decisions in the future. Well, now that's something. Remember, I just said, and Scott Bessent pointed out, that Democrats forced the closure of many, many small lending institutions all over the country because the government was trying to enforce upon them social engineering, DEI, ESG, all of the letters. Eric Schmidt, people like President Trump, they're simply saying, let's stop rewarding illegal behavior. Let's not release illegal aliens back into the community after they have committed additional crimes besides breaking into the country. Let's arrest them and deport them. When you violate the law, you should be deported. No one disputes that. No one disagrees with that. That's common sense. People like Mazie Hirono don't like it, but again, it's common sense. Similarly, I think most people believe that lending institutions ought not lend to illegal aliens in the United States and shouldn't extend them credit. We shouldn't be rewarding illegal aliens with the same kind of treatment American citizens would be given. The Trump administration planning to release a policy statement that will tell banks they may consider a client's immigration status as part of their ability to repay when offering mortgages and credit cards. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Can you imagine giving a mortgage to an illegal alien? Would you? Let me ask you, if you had a pot of money that you were going to lend to people. Aaron, I'll use you. Let me just bounce this off you, Aaron.
Okay.
Let's just say you've got $1 million. You're just sitting, it's cool, $1 million in your bank account. You're not going to touch it. You keep it for a rainy day, or maybe somebody comes along and says, hey, Aaron, I need some help. Could you lend a brother $50,000? I'm good for it. I'll pay you back. Oh, one thing. I broke into the country from Guatemala. So if you could keep that between us, that'd be great. Anyway, can I have the 50 grand? How likely are you to give that over to a loan?
Not likely at all. Like, I would not even consider this.
Well, because again, just human beings, you wouldn't lend someone money that literally doesn't have citizenship, just arrived, is here illegally, has no record of where they live or where they're going to go. As soon as you hand that money out, you're probably never going to see it back, don't you? Isn't that what you're thinking?
Exactly.
Yeah. So
I'm not in the business of charity.
That's right. Yeah. And you're just a guy. You're not a financial institution. So you'd think the financial institutions ought to be a little more stringent in their lending practices. That's the sort of thing that I think the federal government has a role in regulating. We probably, as American lending institutions, should not be lending to illegal aliens. I don't think that's tough to get our minds wrapped around. The Trump administration has also unveiled a $700 million coal industry support plan using the Defense Production Act. Donald Trump Thursday announced a nearly $700 million initiative at the White House aimed at supporting the U.S. coal industry. Meeting with leaders in the Oval Office, Trump said he would invoke the Defense Production Act, which was a Cold War-era law granting presidents broad authority over industries considered vital to national security, directing federal support to coal projects across the country to save 13 coal plants in West Virginia, Kentucky, North Carolina, Indiana, Tennessee, Arkansas, Arizona, Oklahoma, North Dakota, and Wisconsin. The president announced the plan during a White House event focused on what the administration calls beautiful, clean coal. If you look at China, if you look at so many of the successful countries, they're using coal, Trump said. If you look at some of the really great failures, countries using the wind, just keeps blowing and blowing and blowing, and it'll put you right out of business. China, by the way, last year built 52 coal plants. They built about 2 windmills. The only time they build a windmill is when they're trying to sell them to stupid people from the United States and the suckers. And then finally, I'm going to close with this bit of good news this week. Well, before I close with this bit of good news, let me share with you something else that makes me happy. I do have a couple of clips that just make me smile because it's 3 people that are out of work that deserve to be out of work in no particular order. Jim Acosta, the loathsome Don Lemon, and then the haughty Scott Pelley, who we talked about earlier in the week, was fired from CBS News in 60 Minutes. The haughty Scott Pelley. They're very concerned, old Jim, who was fired from CNN, and Scott Pelley, who was fired from CBS. Jim Acosta and Don Lemon, I should say, also fired from CNN. They're also, much like Jim Acosta and Katie Couric were upset, now Jim Acosta and Don Lemon are very upset that Scott Pelley has been fired. Isn't it fun to watch all of these miserable, sad sack, loathsome, partisan, hack, leftist, pretend journalists now sit around the campfire and cry in their beer about losing their jobs? Don Lemon may be the worst. It's tough to pick a worst. But Don Lemon, of course, most recently, just this year, stormed into a church worship service and called it journalism. Don Lemon, in my view, should be behind bars. But okay, I digress. So here's Jim and Don very upset that the haughty Scott Pelley from the bottom jaw, chewing on his glass. Very upset that old Scott's been fired from 60 Minutes and CBS News. Here we go. Makes me
As
smile.
Don was saying, make no mistake, they don't care about the ratings. They don't care about making money. This is an ideological and partisan political project on the part of the Ellisons, the Trump-friendly Ellisons who now control Paramount, who, by the way, are trying to take control of WBD and CNN and turn it into this giant media conglomerate that will essentially act like a state media organization in support of Donald Trump. As Don
What a miserable looking bunch. Nicole Wallace, Don Lemon, and Jim Acosta. You imagine being at a party with those people? Look at them. Look at their miserable faces. Here's a little more from Don on old Scott, bottom jaw, getting fired. Remember,
the irony in all this is,
and by the way, can we hang on just a second here, Aaron? I just like everybody to remember as you hear this, I just want you to remember Don Lemon stormed into a worship service this year and disrupted it with a band of thugs masked as journalism. He stormed into a church worship service under the auspices of protesting immigration. So as you consider Don Lemon storming into a church worship service, a clear violation of the First Amendment, consider that as he says this about Scott Pelley.
you mentioned, I forgot Barry Weiss, that she owned a journalistic outlet called the Free Press. Right. And when you think about what is that, the irony in that. But look, I think that Jim is right. In this moment, this is a very dangerous moment. And not only do I feel the folks who are in charge, the management, the people in the C-suites, the owners, it's their fault. But I also think that I think Scott Pelley is an example to all journalists. And if you are in that position, in a way, if I was still there, I might feel a bit embarrassed that I had not stood up. And I understand that people have obligations. You've got mortgages, you got all of those things. But I look at journalism in a very similar way as I do an attorney, do no harm, a doctor, do no harm, and you take an oath. And if someone is giving you not necessarily an illegal order, it's something that goes against journalistic principles, I don't believe that you should follow it.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening in this moment. And it's, the people who are standing up are the people who have the least power, I believe, in this moment. Maybe in an odd way, we have a power that we don't really understand. But a lot of our corporate friends are not standing up. And here you have Jim Acosta and me and others who are in independent media, and we are fighting the fight without the big corporation, without the big attorneys, without all the money that goes along with it. Mm-hmm. We're out here in these independent streets fighting it. And, people who have much more agency and influence in this are not standing up. So journalists, stand up. If you're in a position and they're telling you to do something that, like Scott Pelley said they were telling him to do,
to insert things that
don't do it.
Yeah.
Just and tell them.
Right.
And look, I think when I left, I was disappointed that the people who did not come to my defense, there were many, and they were told that they couldn't. That's what I've heard from folks, that they were told that they couldn't. But I think people in this moment need to stand up for Scott Pelley. I think people need to be a Scott Pelley instead of, one of those people, one of those lackeys who go on television every day or every night and just lie and stand up for Donald Trump even when he's wrong. We should all be a Scott Pelley. Scott Pelley should be an example to us. We should all support him. His story is our story. If we lose the First Amendment, the freedom of the press, it is over. This whole experiment that we have towards a more perfect union is over. It is the First Amendment is the bedrock of our Constitution, and without it, nothing else stands.
I mean,
yeah. Again, I remind you, he stormed into a church service this year. Mr. First Amendment is the bedrock of our country. Stormed into a church. He also is a dope in that he just made an argument against the very thing he suggests Scott Pelley was so important and represented, and that is independent journalists. Journalists must stand up. We will lose everything if journalists don't stand up. Didn't he just go on and on and on about him and Jim Acosta and their brave independent journalism and how they don't need the big corporations anymore? So then he says that Scott Pelley and others have an obligation to stand up to these big corporate media types and tell them, no, I'm not going to do what you want. And again, when corporate media tells journalists stop being partisan and just report the straight news, and they say, I hate Donald Trump, I want to continue to report on hating Donald Trump, and they say, no, we need you to be fair because 77 million people voted for Donald Trump and they're not watching us. You need to start being fair. And they say, no, Donald Trump's awful. And they say, well, then you're going to have to get out of here. And Don Lemon and Jim Acosta and Nicole Wallace and Scott Pelley think that is unfair. That's being chilling to the First Amendment. No, that's the free market. There is no excuse in 2026 for anyone to not be able to go out and do whatever kind of journalism you want. But I guarantee you that little Jim there and little Donnie there and Nicole there, they have nothing. They have no viewers. And Scott Pelley, if he decides to go somewhere and go do something independent, he can. God bless America. You're here watching the Heartlander News right now. Heartlander News is an independent outlet. Town Hall, our great friends and partners, a great independent media outlet. It stands on its own. It stands on viewers. It stands on revenue. The only way these things work is if people watch them and listen and share them and support the sponsors who sponsor the independent journalism. Don Lemon doesn't have that. Jim Acosta doesn't have that. Scott Pelley wouldn't have that. This is a business. Journalism is important, but there's never been more readily available information to you and me than there is in 2026. You've never had more choice in where you get your information, and that is what really bothers them, folks. That's the nut out of it. If we really get down to the brass tacks of all of it, these people are lamenting the fact that they were the only place to get information. They controlled all that you heard and saw and thought, and that's not true anymore, and that makes them mad. And it's that simple. One final thought before I get out of here today, and it confirms as we wrap up the week the very good news that I have always maintained about what's going on in Iran right now. There have been very short-sighted reports about what's going on in Iran right now, and then there's President Trump who says, stay calm, all's going to work out in the end, but I'm not in a hurry here. Remember, we talked about how politically unpopular it would have been, and President Trump knew, to go into Iran, decimate them, and make certain that they didn't have not only the nuclear ambition, but they didn't have the drones to protect their nuclear ambitions. We were getting very, very close to Iran being something that we could not defend against, which means they would control the flow of oil through the Strait. They could effectively hold the global oil market hostage in perpetuity if we didn't act. So we acted. And President Trump said, this may not happen as quickly as you'd like. And I know gas prices went up. They're starting to come down a little bit, but I know they went up. He was warned they'll go up. If you do this, Mr. President, he said, consequences be damned. We got to do this. He did it. And I've said all along, keep a sharp eye on what we're watching in terms of OPEC and the global market structure. That's not being talked about enough. The fact that these moderate Muslim and Arab countries are breaking away from OPEC, like the UAE, they're actually helping the United States and Israel tackle Iran and their proxies. That's a huge bit of news. The fact that they may, through the Abraham Accords, actually strike a partnership with Israel soon and do trade. We're watching a strategic realignment of energy and commerce in the Middle East. This is a much bigger story than just the obvious story of Iran, us, the Strait of Hormuz. This is a long ball restacking of the global order of things. And President Trump is orchestrating it all. And the Wall Street Journal has to admit it. For decades, the Persian Gulf's energy map converged on a single choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. And now, spurred by the Iran war, the region's petrostates are rushing to draw new lines to circumvent it. Across the Gulf, governments are pouring billions into new oil pipelines, rail corridors, and energy storage hubs to bypass the waterway in what is set to become one of the most durable outcomes of the conflict. The new energy links are part of a broader redrawing of the region's logistics maps, shifting trade toward trucking, rail, and new ports. The legacy of this crisis will result in the construction and infrastructure to bypass the Strait of Hormuz, said a commodities-based London research firm. Even if Washington and Tehran reach a deal to reopen the strait and maritime exports resume, the shift toward an export network with multiple exits will endure because the conflict has proven that robust contingency plans are essential. Well, shazam. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it appears it might be a little more involved than what people like Scott Pelley and Jim Acosta and Nicole Wallace and Don Lemon tell you. It might just be that the president saw something bigger, broader, more global and strategic in the long run for not just our interests, which were first, but free people everywhere. And that was, we can't allow Iran this choke point. We can't allow Iran to be the control lever for the free flow of oil across the globe. It can't happen. So he's taken back Venezuela. They're going to start pumping oil out of Venezuela, and it's going to benefit, and it's going to hurt Iran. They're going to make the Strait of Hormuz just one of many ways to get oil to the global market instead of the only way. That's going to hurt Iran. Iran is being decimated slowly. Death by 1,000 cuts. It's a beautiful thing to see. Meanwhile, we continue to produce more oil too. Like to see us start building refineries in the United States. If we ever get to a place where we start building oil refineries again, that will be a very good thing. So when people ask, we produce all this oil, we're a net domestic exporter of oil, why don't we keep it here? Because we can't refine it here. We don't have refineries to do the work to refine all the oil we're producing. That needs to change if we truly want to be reliant. I think Donald Trump has plans for that as well. So that's the good news. As we wrap up on this Friday edition here at Heartlander News from America's Heartland, I hope you'll stay close by subscribing to us. Every new show, when it drops, you'll be able to catch it. If you're alerted to it and you're signed up, be sure to give us a like, too, and comment if you have any thoughts on this show or any show we do here at Heartlander News. We're glad to have you along. Hope you have a great weekend. We'll see you next time right here on Heartlander News.